Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. March has come and gone, which means I have a month's worth of favorites and reflections to share. I don't know about you all, but it felt like a very slow and very fast month for me all at once. I had quite a lot going on, and I think that for a lot of us, springtime or nearing spring is when a lot of things tend to ramp up or fall into our laps. We're energized, people around us are, and so it can create a bit of a maelstrom of chaos. So without further ado, I'll jump right in. As always, I start with the decks that I've been working with and loving. Then I make my way into the books that I've read in the past month with small reviews on them. And I end with any miscellaneous objects and experiences and updates. So if you're looking to skip around, that's how I do things here. But without further ado, we will start with the decks. So one that I'll mention first is actually a deck that I've had at my work desk throughout the day anytime I want a card pull. For the past month, it's actually been the Alchemical Tarot, specifically the 5th edition. I just personally think the color palette, I've been really into the greens lately. Green is also probably my favorite color if I ever had to pick one. So the color palette's nice. I think a lot of my readings recently have been quite occult focused with an alchemical twist. So this seems to align pretty closely with my studies and interests, plus Robert M. Poise's artwork is amazing. I like decks I can study. I've read the book on that he's written on this deck in tarot history. I have a review of that if anybody's curious, but decks that have a lot of meaning and symbolism imbued in them are right up my alley. So I've had this one just out and about on hand for personal use, but I have used it with some clients, I believe, this month. I'm trying to remember. But yeah, it's definitely probably been the all-star for me. And it comes and goes pretty often in my practice. On top of that, we've got, of course, Marseille decks. I tend to either go for a Noble, which I've been using a lot with clients. Take it out of its pouch just so you can see. It's not a fancy one. It's my inexpensive one that I don't mind bringing out and about and around. But it's still really nice, and it sort of has that old school feel, not super sharp lines. It's very, hazy, and it just looks vintage, although it's not. And then the other deck, the other Marseille deck I tend to use a lot is the Midnight deck, which I know is now has a second print running, so it should be available. This is just what the backs look like with the first edition, but I think it's cheeky and fun and a little bit it's sneaky. It gives me a trickster's energy, especially when you look at any of the faces of cards that do have faces in a Marseille deck. So there's those. I talk about those somewhat often. We do have a few new decks this month. I guess I'll just get this one out of the way though too. Just a version of the Toth. I have it in this pouch. This is my greenie. That's always going to be in rotation. And then two that I also mentioned last month that I guess I'll just get out of the way quickly are the Hermes Oracle playing cards by Robert M. Poise as well. I think aesthetically it goes along really nicely with the Alchemical Tarot, and his art style tends to be cohesive across all of his decks. And that's something that my Libra moon loves. I love a certain aesthetic when we can stick to something and it looks nice. And then I've also been, it's not cooperating, but just the Tabula Mundi Tarot by M.M. Moline, a version of a Toth that I think artistically the renderings are stunning. So I've been working with that one again this month as well. But new decks in the lineup that came back into play. It's not any, none of these decks are new to me, but they are having a revival in my practice. So one is the Orbifold Tarot. I'm not sure if this one's in print anymore. Last I heard it wasn't, but the creator may have reprinted. I forget the creator's name too. I apologize, but if you Google it, I'm sure you'll be able to find it. The backs look like this. It's an indie deck. It's pretty shiny and very simple. So for people who like Marseille and Pip decks, of course this isn't Marseille, but I guess the same concepts apply in that, you're not getting too much in the way of great illustrations. I mean, the illustrations are great. They're not great or illustrated in terms of the amount of things going on. So we've got this. I'm somebody who really values the system of tarot, and when trying to identify why I like Marseille decks, Pip decks. I think it's that I don't like being influenced by specific scenes and renderings that depict the meaning of a card. I'd rather take the system and formula of a tarot deck and have it presented to me and then fill in the blanks myself. So having a number and a suit, or the suit that corresponds to an element, transposing my other sorts of symbolic elements and associations and meanings onto them, and going from there. I think I like the wiggle room that gives me and the sort of creative freedom that I can take with a deck like this, whereas a more illustrated deck, while potentially more exciting, I find it influences me and the readings are not nearly as true to my own thoughts and opinions. They're more so derivative of whatever the card is showing. And I know that works for some people, but something like the Orbifold Tarot, I really enjoy it. Although I have been a little harsh on the Orbifold Tarot the last time I talked about it, which was some time ago. I don't think it's the best quality deck, and if I were to go through the cards, a bunch of them had like ink on them, and I tried to end up getting a new one. The creator didn't really respond to me back when that happened. The cards were also kind of like, not bent, but they warped in opposite directions, so the deck would never lay flat. So there was a few things with it. I still love the deck, and I was just, I tried to get a new one. I didn't really get much of a response on that, but it's back in the rotation. I've been enjoying it. It's a little bit more modern, computer art generated looking than I tend to go for, but I like the simplicity and the sort of novelty of it. Another one that's worked its way back in is the Dream Dust Shamanic Tarot. I feel like I had a moment with this last year where it was like my pride and joy. It comes in this big box with the magnet. It's a huge deck, and I would consider this more of an art deck. I rarely use it for divination, even now that I am actively using it again. It has a really wonderful guidebook. It's by Sue Kovacs, and it's a very poetic deck. It reminds me a bit of the, why did I almost want to say Mary L? Not the Mary L. The Margaret Peterson. Is that what the deck is that the deck? I think it's the Margaret Peterson. It kind of reminds me of that. There is a sort of poem or line to go along with each one. They're very abstract and just creative images, so there's not really forms and figures. There's like a color palette with these organic lines. It has this very earthy and natural feeling to it. There's gold gilding. These are the backs. It's quite shiny and glossy, so they stick together a bit, and it's not the easiest to shuffle given the size. It's pretty big, but I like the little things at the bottom. I think that the evocative colors and lines are very inspiring, so I think these are great for journal prompts, for creative juices, getting those flowing, to interact with a card or a type of energy more so than divination, although I will use it for card pulls, and I do think it would be great with clients to set an intention or a tone. However, when it comes to true divination and a full reading, I don't like the fact that, for example, we have a set of keywords or meanings along the bottom. Not my favorite, but I can see the value in it for what the deck is. So there's that, and then the final deck I have to share is one that always comes back for me during the spring or when the spring starts to happen. The Green Wheel Oracle by Danielle Barlow in this big box. I think I have a review on this deck, so if you're looking for more detail on it, definitely check that out. I'll try to link it around. Has a nice guidebook that offers quite a bit for each of them. So it's very much centered around the Wheel of the Year. We have all of the moons, we have seasonal cards, and there are animal sort of spirit cards, I guess you could call them, or animal essences. And then we get the pouch inside the box, and the cards themselves are the most linen-y, if that makes sense, the most fabric type of card I've ever seen. It actually feels like you're holding some sort of textile fabric, the way that it's woven, and it almost doesn't feel like paper. Here's a few of the cards. I'm not usually somebody who has seasonal decks that I swap in and out, but as the energies change and things look green around me and I see this deck, it just looks super appealing. So I love it. I would say that I value the animal cards probably the most, and there are times when I'll take out just the animal cards to use as inspiration or guidance, and I will sometimes use them in client readings as far as energies go. I think animals are a great form of natural symbolism in the world around us, and trying to work with and channel those energies in a metaphorical sense, energetic sense, is super fun and a great way to spice up any spiritual or magical practice. So I've been enjoying that, and that takes us through all of the decks. Now the books, which tend to be the all-star moment of my favorites because I love my books. This month I went a little bit crazier on the books. I guess it's been a stressful month and I didn't realize that my coping mechanism was stress reading. And in the last few days of the month, I started to look at my pile and I was like, oh wow, that's significantly bigger than normal or most months, especially given that last month was a smaller month than average. This one's a larger month than average. So as I'm sure the infamous Icarus once said, I may have girl bossed a little bit too close to the sun, and then he fell. So we'll get through this. I'll start with these two because I have shown them in videos already. These are just two poetry books that focus a little bit more on occult and metaphysical, spiritual topics. I use this one for an exercise in tarot and to just inspire this sort of poetic exercise. I'll link that around. I read this. It's more of a feminist poetry book with, I would say, vocabulary that is more occult, but I wouldn't call any of the poems in here at their heart magical or spiritual or occult. At least that's not the intention. It's more so the wrapping paper and the core is meant to be more of an experiential telling. It's quite experimental. I know it's not for everybody, given the style, but I appreciated it even though it's not something I normally would go for. Then we've got A Casting of Light. This is a more, is it supposed to be Platonic or is it based on, just want to make sure I get this right, by the Platonic tradition. So yes, it's more of that sort of philosophical Spiritus Mundi type of thing. It's heavily rooted in Greek philosophy and spirituality, things like, Pythagoras and all of those sorts of philosophers that were highly spiritual when we really look in their work and what they were all about and their theories. So you get these poems about existence and life and meaning, and I found this one to be really inspiring and thought-provoking. I can see myself returning to this, reading this quite often. There's something about it that really got me, so I would say I definitely recommend this one. I got it, or at least this edition I got, on Treadwell's. Same for with this one. I think Treadwell's has great books, both rare and indie books. I like how they go for smaller publishers or independently published books. And then also the editions that they have available are always so pleasing to the eye. So two poetry books, not usually a poetry person, but I guess this month I kind of am. So wait, let me see, let's put these over there. All right, then I'll make my way through two books that I read from a series that I'm reading or continuing to read. We have The Song Rising and The Mask Falling. So I read the first two books in the series. I remember last month I talked about, I believe it was The Mime Order, which was the second, and a month or two before I had read The Bone Season. So it's the Bone Season series by Samantha Shannon. This is the third and fourth book respectively, and I know it's intended for there to be 7. So since the fourth one just came out, there's supposedly going to be another 3 more, and there are also novellas that are scattered throughout that offer context and flashbacks, and I think I've read one of the novellas, I can't remember, but Song Rising, the basic gist of this world in these books, because I don't like to give a lot away, and it's hard not to if you're going to talk about sequels, because they're based on, or a series where it's already been, expanded upon. In this world, we've got our main character, Paige Mahoney, and takes place in an alternate UK, essentially, mostly London, although the fourth one takes place outside of London. I won't spoil that, or mostly does. But it's a world where there are psychic abilities. There's this sort of very tangible, provable, literal ether or beyond that certain individuals have powers through, or the ability to connect to whether it's visual or auditory. They can sort of do things. Spirits are very much a part of the reality. Society doesn't like the clairvoyance. I won't get into too much because there's a lot of surprises and nuances, and this is a very long-ranging series where a lot happens, and there's these sort of global, there's war and this and that, and I don't want to give too much away, but the society that wants to eradicate these clairvoyants. Of course, they don't want to be eradicated, so it's very much this militarized state. It's quite tyrannical. I think that there's a lot of parallels that can be drawn to our society today, just kind of substituting the castigation and denigration and execution of clairvoyance and substitute that with any other movement that we see going on, or group that we find that gets the brunt of or the short end of the stick in society at large. But really great books. Clearly I'm liking them. I read 2 in the same month. I would recommend the series for anybody out there who likes fantasy and who is into those fantastical psychic elements. I think these are great. And I have continued to like them more as they've gone. They've picked up action, they've expanded upon and grown into themselves as a series. I think the first one I found a little bit more corny, but now that it's matured in a way, the same way that you might imagine when you're reading Harry Potter, the books become a little bit more mature over time. It seems like this series does that a little bit as well, so I value that about it. It does grow. Next we've got, here I'll just do the novels and I'll save this tarot one for last. We have All of Us Villains. This is the first in, I think, what is intended to be a series. I got it actually just on a whim at Target and it was on sale. But Blood Before All of Us Villains by Amanda Foody and Christine Lynn Herman. So it's, I guess, 2 co-writers. And the way I would describe this is if you were to do a mashup of The Hunger Games, where The Hunger Games maybe meets a magical world or something super dark. It actually reminds me a lot of the books that I read a little bit by, I think it's by V.E. Schwab, the Vengeful and Vicious 2-book series. The cover looks the same and it's sort of that similar vibe, but it really is like The Hunger Games, but for magic. And there's this world where magic exists, everybody knows about it, and apparently there's high magic, which was a very finite resource in the world, and then there's common magic, which everybody has. People have thought high magic has been, extinct or gone for hundreds of years. Apparently these 7 families have a contest every 20 years where they give one sort of teenager, child, youthful individual as tribute. They fight to the death. The family that wins gets the high magic for the next 20 years. And apparently it's been a secret, but now the world knows about it. So this is a competition. We get multiple perspectives, not all of the participants. We don't get their perspective. I think we get 4, and the chapters alternate. And you get the lead up, you get the event itself. I'm not going to give anything away where all that's concerned. Very interesting. It's sort of campy and corny in the way the dialogue works, and it's a little bit stereotypical in the way that some of the characters fit very tried and true archetypes within books. Just, the tropes and the themes, it's all been there, done that, but I think that's the point, and I enjoyed it for that fact. You even get a little bit on the book and the authors at the end, and I think they intended it, as it said, intended this book to be a little campy, and you can definitely get that feeling. It has this very intentionally corny and campy feel to it, so if you're into magic and fantasy, action, and that sort of, it's very action-oriented, and I like books like this where the morals are gray, the characters are not meant to always be these altruistic, perfect beings. Everybody is equally flawed in different ways, and so you find yourself rooting for someone and then not once you find something else out, and actually I've changed my mind and I like you better, but I don't like you. I love books like that are kind of just putting me through the ringer in terms of my own opinions. This one was good for that, and I read it pretty quick. Next, we've got The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik. I read the first book in this series a couple months back, and I believe I talked about it. I forget what the first one was called. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember. But I did read the first one in the series a few months back. Second one's now out. This is about a magical school. It's pretty messed up. I guess you could definitely consider this maybe more along the lines of a very gory, violent, more mature version of Hogwarts. I guess in this world, these students are sent to this school for 4 years. They're sort of teleported there and they have to remain if they get in. And the reason that they go there is because as they become these magicians, the magic that they're starting to give off attracts a lot of these sorts of creatures and monsters that want to kill and eat them. And they go to the school for protection and to learn. However, the school is not perfect, and only about a 1/4 of the students make it out alive by graduation, but I guess that's better apparently than their odds outside, they say. So the school prevents some of the monsters from getting in, not all of them. It's sort of everybody for themselves, and they're planning towards graduation. It's very almost not dystopian, but it's very Lord of the Flies in a way, or they're fighting for resources, there's alliances, there's all of this crazy stuff going on, a lot of people dying, lots of gore, and we get the main character who's sort of this disenchanted, very almost jaded character who specializes in these darker forms of magic but doesn't want to sort of give in to that, so she's doing the best she can. She's not very likable or considered likable, and it's just about her journey through the school. The second one, The Last Graduate, as it may disclaim, this is her final year at the school. I'm not going to tell you what happens to her or any of the other characters, but it's very interesting, and just it's a really cool way that magic is hypothesized in this world. I find it super interesting. The world building is probably my favorite, and the main character, I believe her name is Galadriel, and she goes by Elle. I didn't like her as much in the first one. It was supposed to be that unlikable character who is likable, and that was what made me not like her. However, in this one, her development has turned my opinion as well. So if you read this and the first one you find yourself like turned off by the characters, I would say stick through it and get to the second one. Next and final book that I read this month, we've got The Tarot History, Mystery, and Lore by Cynthia Giles. This is mostly a tarot history book. It's a little dated, I was finding as I was reading it, especially in terms of references and just talking about current happenings in regards to tarot history. This was published in 1992, I believe. Let me double check. 1992, I think, was the original publication. It wasn't updated, although it has more recent additions, but it hasn't been updated in its core content. So some of that history and things that we thought we knew, we've come to learn there are other things that have happened. Although I do like how this book, it starts with a sort of primer to tarot itself. We get the occult, we get all these other things going farther back, and we get the more spiritual, mythological side to the history of tarot, what we believe or what we, I would say, assert to be true but don't know. And then we get the more scientific side. What can we prove when we're dating, for example, pieces of paper? Oh, we found this, and we've done some tests on X, Y, and Z, and we know that it's actually this year, although it claims to be this year. Or we found records writing about this deck at this time in this place, and so we know that it existed, but we can't find anything before that. So I thought that was really cool to know about that. However, there's like sections later on about recommendations for working with the tarot decks, tarot book recommendations, all of which are quite out of date. A lot of those books aren't in print, and I think that there are some better books out there, and there are definitely a lot more books out there now than what there were going on during this time. However, I think the history portion and the primer on tarot was still really interesting and fun, and yeah, I enjoyed it for that fact. Can't get enough in terms of learning about the tarot, and I love that kind of thing. So I would recommend this one, but take it with a grain of salt, just knowing that it was written in 92, and of course now we're in 2022, so we have 30 years worth of time and space that has separated this book from us, and we know other things now to be the case. So yeah, take it with a grain of salt. That brings us through all of the books. I tried to make that as succinct as possible, but definitely a book heavy month, and I enjoyed it for that fact. Like I said, I think I was stress reading, which I guess as far as a coping mechanism goes is a little bit healthier than some other options and avenues, so proud of myself for that. But I'll get into the miscellaneous items, which I tend not to have very much of, but I guess I pulled out, I'm not sure if I shared this before, but if I have and it's repetitive, I apologize. If I haven't, then it's new, and here you go. I got this little obsidian alien crystal skull. I hesitate to say crystal because I know obsidian is a volcanic glass and technically not a crystal, but I thought it was so cute and fun, and I don't really have much like this. I keep it on my work desk along with the alchemical tarot. If you could see my work area, I try to incorporate spirituality in there just so that I don't go insane and I still feel connected to my practice. But super cute, and I like this little alien skull. Another thing that I've been enjoying, I guess this is just one example because when I use up a candle, I tend to I'll usually just throw it out, but scented candles. I'm not usually big on scented candles, and I'm pretty particular about which ones I like. This one I've liked. I'm on my second one, actually. This is the olive leaf an ode, I believe is how you would say this, with notes of geranium, rose, amber, and desert ode. It's pretty small actually. This is one of those ones that you can get at Target, at least in the Target where I live. These are, I don't know, they just look super cool and elevated and chic, and this scent it's not too heavy and musky. I tend to like heavier and muskier and smokier scents. I don't like super bright and fresh. I don't like florals. I don't like citrus usually, unless it's really woven into something that's heavier to ground it. So sharp, fresh, clean scents even I'm not a big fan of, like eucalyptus and stuff, not for me. So something like olive leaf and oud that sort of has this deep, almost sweet, musky, there's a bit of a tang or bitterness underneath as well. I like candles like that. And I like that the options for this, you have the option of one of these smaller ones, because sometimes I'll get a big candle and get tired of it, and then it just sits halfway burned out until I circle back around to it maybe like a year later, or by the time I circle back around to it, it's been thrown out or lost. So with these smaller ones, you know, I actually get through the candle, but it's not so small that it ends up running out too quickly. So I've enjoyed that. There's a couple others that I've liked, but I've thrown them out because I finished them. But I like this one, and it's also nice that it's more like metal and coconut soy wax blend. I mean, I know I got it at Target. It's not like I'm the most, you know, sustainable in having done that, but I guess the packaging is better than having a bunch of plastic, and it just came like this with no outer packaging. So I guess the metal is a little bit better, and the type of wax is good too. So I think that about wraps up everything, if I'm not mistaken, at least everything that I had brought out. So I hope you are all well. Let me know what you've all been reading, what decks you've been loving, what objects you've been working with, what your month of March was like, and what you're expecting in April. I don't know what's to come for me in April. I'm filming this actually on my lunch break, I guess update on the job. It's been busy, and I have a busy weekend, and I'm not sure if I would have time to film this, so I decided that I would film it now because I have been getting a lot of joy out of being consistent with my uploads. It almost feels like I still have something of myself, and that is my own outside of this career that I don't necessarily find fulfilling, and one that I'm not planning on staying in longer than I have to. So yeah, tarot uploads, Instagrams, anything tarot related when I do have my client readings that I try to weave in on some evenings, and I have openings on the weekends usually. Those bring me a lot more joy now that they're kind of contrasted with something that I don't enjoy as much that is super time consuming. But as far as what I have in store for in April, not really sure. Looking forward to the warmer weather and nicer days to come where I can get outside. But that's about it for me. Let me know how you are all doing. Like and subscribe if this was fun and interesting, and if you want to hang around or not. And until next time, bye.